Hello, parents and teachers who may be watching. Welcome to Creating Math Ahas for Parents. I'm Dr. Sandy Atkins, Sandy, and I'd like to continue our discussion of working with fractions with your children. Now, in the first one, I talked about making fractional units, that whole idea of those creating those fractional parts. And I'll leave a link below in the description so you can go back and refer to that video. And this one, I'd like us to think about what I see as the next step of the process. Your children quite often start off with a fraction kit. So they have something that they've made. They go through and they have to draw those pieces, right? So they need to draw wholes and halves, fourths, eighths, thirds. I do six. But what we find is for some of your children, it's difficult just to draw wholes all the same length. So you might see your child's teacher ask your children to just practice drawing the wholes. Because for us to be able to compare fractions and add fractions and do all the things we need to do, the first step is getting your child comfortable with drawing the wholes. And then comfortable drawing the parts relatively well and efficiently. So you might see this page of just drawing wholes, trying to get them all the same length and that same size, so the same size rectangles for this model. And then you might see your children doing something with Play-Doh. Now I've got a Play-Doh snake here that I've made. And part of the reason for that is we find that it's difficult for your children not just to draw the holes, but then to cut them into equal size pieces. Now, one thing that we do is whatever they cut or whatever they build, they draw. So you saw the holes. This is our snake that kind of looks like that strip that we're using, that fraction strip. And then we're going to cut it into two equal pieces. Now, if you listen to my language during this video, you'll notice I use equal piece language, fair share language a lot more than I call it a half at first. That comes later, but we need to make sure your child understands that these pieces have to be the same size. We need to use the whole piece, and then we draw the picture. Now, when it comes to four equal pieces, quite often I see, and it would have been good if my halves were equal, right? But quite often I see folks put the one half under the other so they can make a single cut. That's an efficient way to cut that snake into four equal pieces, but it doesn't match how we draw it. When we draw it, we start with the half and we cut one of those sides into two equal pieces, right? And then we cut the other side into two equal pieces, okay? So we want to make sure that your children are cutting that snake the way that they draw the picture. That will help make that link a little more quickly, a little easier connection for them. And then we can go through and do the 8 equal pieces. And if you notice, I keep talking about 2, 4, 8. Then I go back and do 3 and 6 typically, because those are harder. But think about repeated halving. I have it to get 2. I have it again to get 4. I have it again to get 8. Then when we do 3, we have it, we get 6. And when we get to 12 equal pieces, we have it again to get 12. So that repeated halving is really helpful with this and that idea. Then we've talked about a fraction kit. And again, I'll leave those links in the description. But typically your children are given, I usually start with 6. If I'm doing 12 equal pieces in the end, 7 different colored strips of paper. And they're asked to fold a sheet. So they might take the yellow one set aside, the green one 2 equal, the orange one 4 equal. In this case, we're going to cut it into 4 equal pieces. So typically what happens, they fold it in half, just like they did with the snake, cut it in half. They can fold each of those into halves, okay? Now, they get that, and they've got their whole kit made. And notice the order I have again. A whole, 2, 4, 8, 3, and 6 equal pieces. And this kit we're going to keep using as we go through this talk and other talks that are coming up. So I want you to keep thinking of this kit. Now, Part of what we want them to do is start looking at the relationships of the pieces. So they just have all these colored strips, and that's just a very open-ended start exploring. And many of your children will start lining up all the pieces, almost like this. So they'll have their whole and then the two, and they'll start putting them in order. Sometimes they're going to have the three, four, and they'll do it kind of in the numeric order. But then they'll start to look at how many fit the whole. Now, see, that's important. And you'll see some of the children who do that. That's how we get the naming of fractions. And this might be kind of seem like a silly step in between, but see, we want them to know how we make fractional units. So this is an important conceptual step. So the idea is if 4 orange are the same as a yellow, what would 1 orange be called? If 3 red are the same as a yellow, what would 1 red be called? And we can go through and talk about that. Now, one thing I hope you'll notice in all of the fraction videos I do, whether I use actual physical pieces and we do it under a document camera, a projector of some type, or I do it on the screen here with a slide presentation, I don't label the pieces. And part of the reason I don't label them, it's very important, is because it has embedded practice then. See, if they're labeled, they just have to read the name on the piece. They don't know why it's called that. They just know it's called 1/4. But if I don't label it and they're like, what was this one again? Well, they have to go back and check and find out how many pieces equaled that whole. And then that's how they name the piece. So it's an important step is to leave the pieces unlabeled. It's very important for building in practice and fluency. Now, I showed you where they were looking all at a yellow. You'll see some other ones where they might mix and match color. And they'll see what pieces equal other pieces in here. And if you see, these are just some of the ones. Typically, they get a long sheet of paper filled because they're just playing around these pieces. Now, I said this is typically the first experience I would have your children doing after making the kit, because it previews everything they're going to be doing with fractions, or almost everything, right? Because notice, I'm going to have them look at how many pieces fit inside others and start to label them. But one of the intermediate steps, I guess I was going to skip ahead here, but one of the intermediate steps is getting them how to label multiple pieces of a unit. So I might ask them to show me 3 1/4 pieces, and they hold it up. Now, do you notice how I read that? 3 1/4 pieces. I'm going to want to connect that to 3/4. I also am previewing, as I said, other things coming up. 3 1/4 pieces. Oh, what did you hold up? A fourth put together with a fourth put together with another fourth. Notice my language for the plus sign, but I'm writing plus. Oh, so if I have 3 1/4 pieces, another way to say that is 3/4. Huh. Oh, you mean 3 1/4 pieces. Now notice, I can model multiplication of a whole number times a unit fraction before I'm expecting your children to multiply fractions. But my language stays very conceptual. 3 1/4 pieces. Oh, so that's 3/4. So that I can make those links, make those previews to what they'll actually be doing with this later with addition and multiplication, as we're starting to see how to label the pieces. It's very intentional. It's not a haphazard approach here. Now let's go back to this. I said this would preview what they're doing. If we look at the first one, we start to see the 3 1/3 pieces is equal to a whole. So we get to see another way of talking about wholes. And we start to notice that when the numerator and the denominator are the same, that's going to be a whole. But notice my language again. 3 1/3 pieces is how I'm reading 3/3. They're going to hear it both ways. But when I work with them, I tend to read it the 3 1/3 pieces more often because it gives that visual image. Now, This one, 2 orange equaling 1 green, notice I'm starting to look at equivalent fractions. 2/4 is the same as 1/2, is equivalent to 1/2. 2 1/4 pieces is equivalent to a 1/2 piece. What about this one? Mix and match color. I've got 2/4 put together with 4/8 is the same as 1. 2 1/4 pieces put together with 4 1/8 pieces is the same as a whole. Now I'm adding fractions with unlike denominators. Or here's another example of that. A 1/6 piece put together with a 1/2 piece is the same as 2 1/3 pieces. And now notice that's even more from this one. That 2/4 seeing it's same as the half, 4/8 is same as a half. This one, it's a little bit more challenging, right? I've got a 1/6 piece. That 1/2 is going to be the same as 3 1/6 pieces, 4 1/6 pieces. Now I got to 2/3. That's a more complex version of adding fractions with unlike denominators. And then notice they'll start to compare fractions. The 1/2 is bigger than 1/8. And we can have that discussion is, but 2 is smaller than 8. What do you mean 1/2 is bigger than 1/8? Now see, notice by me having them construct those fractional units, not label them, it brings in discussions that build that conceptual understanding. So I hope this helps in that progression for your children. We start typically by creating fractional units. We might do it with a Play-Doh, some type of dough. We might do it with paper. And then we just want them exploring the fractional units and build a strong connection between what they build and what they draw. And by looking at those relationships very early in their fraction experience, we're previewing in a way everything that they'll be doing or a good bit of what they'll be doing without them being stuck on the mechanics. So again, if you found this helpful, I hope you'll give it a thumbs up. I hope you'll share with others who might find it helpful. Please consider subscribing to the channel. I should have welcomed new subscribers early in the video. Click on that notifications bell so you'll know when other videos become available. Thanks so much for watching.